This is the Enrichment Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Enrichment Sports Source, year number 11 here on the show. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate all your support in the last decade. Hope you'll be with us for the next decade. Today we talk about Tennessee's big 45-0 win, the debut for Team 117 for Butch Jones and his staff. We break it down with a huge crew. I want to get right into it in this first segment, this whole show in fact, brought to you by our good friends at Enrichment Federal Credit Union. All you folks out there with big credit card bills, and that's a lot of you, you can save yourself money by transferring your balances over to an Enrichment Visa, Visa Gold, or MasterCard. Get this, 3.49% fixed APR for the first 12 months. Transfer a balance today, 12 months at 3.49%. Transfer another balance next month, 12 months at 3.49% to pay it off. Just another way that Enrichment Federal Credit Union provides you with the best banking opportunities, the best banking help in all of East Tennessee. Enrichment Federal Credit Union. All right, I said we're going to have a packed show. Here's what's coming up on today's show. These are some folks that aren't even in the first segment. Shazon Bradley, Chuck Cavallera, Sterling Hinton, Brittany Notta, Will Overstreet, Mike Strange, all going to be a part of this program today, as well as the folks who are on set with me right now. Very glad to be joined by Jimmy Himes, by Bob Hodge, by David Ligon this year. David, welcome in.
Thank you.
All right. Gentlemen, Tennessee gets the 45-0 win over Austin Peay. Hard to gauge a game like that. Of course, when you schedule a tomato can, you're supposed to crush it. Okay, well, they crushed it. But when you look back over the last few years, Tennessee beat a pretty good NC State team last year, a bowl team. They still wound up 5-7. A couple of years ago, they whipped up on Montana, a very good FCS program. Still wound up 5-7. Wound up 6-7 in 2010 when they knocked off UT Martin in a blowout. So how much, and I'll start this way and we'll go around, how much do you take from this game, Jim Himes?
I don't think you take a lot from it other than they were efficient. They did what they needed to do. The offense had 6 first-half possessions, scored 6 times. That's what you like to see. I thought Worley was on target for the most part, 11 out of 13. No penalties, which really is surprising when you played that many people. Even in the second half, when you were running your second and third teamers in, I thought that was a good sign. I also thought it was a good sign that I didn't see any issues with the defense lining up properly. I didn't see people running onto the field right before the snap. I didn't see any miscues in the special teams or any forced timeouts because you weren't lined up properly. Those are some of the things I thought were positive for Tennessee.
You should say that there were no called penalties.
Because there are always penalties.
Because there's always penalties. And I think what Jimmy said, the best word is that it was efficient, and what you hope is you come out of this game and it was like a scrimmage. And I think that's what Tennessee can take away from it. It was like a scrimmage for them. They went out there, they did the things they want to do. Nobody came off with a major injury. And you were able to see how the coaching staff does manage all the things Jimmy talked about, because you didn't have to call timeouts because you couldn't get lines. You didn't have to see guys running on the field, running off the field, issues that I think we saw fairly consistently the last 3 years. So, yeah, the opponent, I think, kind of forget about them and just look what Tennessee did well.
David, what did you say?
Well, I was going to say that, from my perspective, I thought there were a lot of positives. Granted, the level of talent of Austin Peay isn't what we're going to face going down the road, but the expectations I had going into this game all were met. I expected Butch Jones to have a very disciplined football team. They did. No penalties. I can't remember the last time I've seen Tennessee have no penalties.
Who were called?
No penalty. If they're not called, they're not a penalty. You can hold. If it's not called, it's not a penalty.
Spoken like an ex-offensive lineman.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to. You can't just hold your hands out and let somebody do that. Just run into them. You got to grab the framework of the body. But they pitched a shutout in the first game. They did all the right things, and that's going to carry over against better talent. Doesn't mean you're going to get a win against an Alabama or a Georgia. But hey, it's better than going out and having all these penalties, being undisciplined, and all of a sudden going, wow, against tougher competition, we're in trouble.
Let's talk about the starting quarterback, Justin Worley. I think he was the very picture of efficient. I mean, 11 of 13, 104 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran the offense pretty well. Maybe looked even a little bit more mobile than I anticipated, although part of that has to do with who he was going against in Austin Peay. But I thought, in terms of a debut, I thought that was about as solid as you could have hoped for Justin Worley.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they did. They ran the football so well. They didn't throw it as much as I was going to hope they would, really get him some work in that area. But when he did, he made good decisions with the football. So from that perspective, that's all you can ask for. We'll find out more about him as a quarterback as we go through the season.
I thought the biggest thing was he was accurate. That's been sort of the knock on Justin Worley going all through spring and coming into the fall, was he wasn't accurate. He has 2 incompletions, and both of the incompletions could have been caught. So he really did not throw what you would call a bad pass the entire game as far as it being accurate. And I thought that was the biggest thing that came away. Now, you do have to adjust down a little bit. He didn't have a lot of pressure, and his receivers were just better than the guys that were trying to cover him. But he still put the ball where he needed to put it.
I thought he had command of the offense too. And I think that the fact that he's been around was one reason Tennessee went with him, because he can make sure everybody gets lined up right. The receivers, he can make sure he gets the pass protection calls properly. He can read a defense. So I think that was part of the reason they went with him. And I just thought I just thought it was a solid, I hate to say debut. He's had 3 other starts, but this is the first time it's his team. So I thought he looked solid.
This is the first time with a real coaching staff working with him. We talked last night. There were a couple of passes where you could probably say that he might have been a little behind the receiver. But again, you're not talking about a pass 5 yards over a guy's head.
Correct.
They were all catchable. Mm-hmm. There was the touchdown pass where, if you try that in the SEC, they're one of those where he just kind of flicked it out there. Mm-hmm. Against an SEC opponent, that might come back to bite you. But I agree. I thought overall.
Well, and you don't like to see, I think if you're a fan, you don't like to see the cupcake opponents come into Tennessee. I think you want to see more competitive football games. But what a great place for them to be able to take the film back and be able to show him, look, this worked on Saturday. It won't work going through the season. Might not even work next week.
We'll talk about Western Kentucky as the show goes on. I want to finish up with you, David, in this segment, something I'm sure you will like. Tennessee, 52 rushes, 315 yards, 6 yards per carry average, and 3 touchdowns. Your thoughts on the run game for the Volunteers last night?
You couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, you go into the game and you're expecting to get 250-plus yards rushing against a team like this. They top that out. You've got to go out there and move the line of scrimmage. They did. That was the thing that, looking at this offensive line, we talk about how great they are. Well, they really haven't shown it. I mean, going back, if they were that great, we wouldn't have as many losses over the past couple of years. Well, they came out and they played well in this game. Can they carry it over against Western Kentucky, which has players that look the part a lot more than Austin Peay? That's where we're going to find out. But they're going to have to be continually challenged to be able to block like that. But for the most part, I think schematically that helped them out some. They really took that defense and spread them out. Austin Peay just doesn't have the players that have the range to do different things to really slow down Tennessee's offense. So there's still so many question marks. But for the first showing, they look good.
Okay, very good, guys. I do want to point out here, I'm sure you're aware of, if you read the paper or if you happen to watch the Mike Keith, Pat Ryan broadcast last night, they pointed this out. Tennessee entered an exclusive club last night, 800th victory in program history. Only 8 schools, including Tennessee, have done that. Michigan, Texas, Michigan's already got 900 wins up there. Michigan, Texas, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Tennessee, as Butch Jones said after the game. It's something you can use on the recruiting trail. That's pretty good. Not a lot of schools can say that. So, Tennessee, congratulations to Team 117 for putting the Vols into the 800 club. When we come back, we will be joined by Brittany Nada. We're going to play the quiz show next. We still have Will Overstreet to break down Tennessee's pass rush. We're going to get more into the offense with this guy, Shazon Bradley, Sterling Hinton, Chuck Cavaleras, Mike Strange. It goes on and on. Come on back on the Enrichment Sports Source.